Nora had a mask, goggles, and surgical cap on, so she was totally covered from head to toe. No one could see what she looked like under all her layers. So none of them saw the mocking smile turning up the corners of her lips. She really hadn't expected her younger sister to try something so shameless. Of course, Angela had no idea that Nora actually was Athena, and would know she was lying about being the one to email her about the surgery. But Angela wasn't just lying to Athena. She was also lying to all the hospital's top doctors and her own college instructor, Dr. Larson. In the past, Nora might have considered being a little nicer, but they were beyond that now. When she spoke as Athena, she deliberately lowered her voice to make her deep tone sound even deeper, as if she had a sore throat. She said, "Of course, thank you for your email. So you're Nora Smith." The whole operating room fell silent. Everyone, including Dr. Larson, looked at Angela. Angela's smile froze and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She realized now that she hadn't thought this through. She hadn't checked whether Nora had signed the email with her own name. Dr. Larson frowned as he asked, "What's the meaning of this, Angela?" Angela took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, Professor Athena, Dr. Larson. I was afraid that Professor Athena would reject my request. I was too embarrassed to use my real name and ended up using my sister's." Dr. Larson's expression mellowed. "I see." Nora was amazed at Angela's inventiveness and quick thinking. She thought it was a shame her sister wasted her intelligence on lies. Nora cast her eyes down, thinking quickly. As she walked to the operating room, she asked, as if the question had just come to her, "How did you get my email address?" Angela, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, was puzzled. Why would anyone ask about this? Besides, her aunt was the patient. Her claim that she had sent the email was perfectly logical. Why was Athena pressing her for more information? She wiped off the sweat that had formed on her forehead and stammered, I got it from a friend." Nora continued her questions as if she couldn't see Angela's discomfort. She asked, "Can you tell me what my email address is?" Angela abruptly stood still, the exposed parts of her face already pale. Her reaction made the truth obvious. Dr. Larson's face was red with anger. "What's the matter with you, Angela? Were you the one who sent the email or not?" Angela had no choice but to tell the truth. "No, it wasn't me." Nora pushed the doors to the operating room open. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Larson shouting angrily, "I can't believe you lied just so you could observe the operation. I'm not rewarding this kind of behavior. I'm revoking your access to the theater. Get out." In the operating room, Irene was lying on the cold bed and staring at the ceiling. She clenched her fists nervously. She turned her head toward the door when she heard it opening. When her gentle eyes met the doctor's, she swallowed nervously. She knew that she was probably on the operating table today. The odds of success were just too low. Her face settled into a resigned smile as the doctor approached her. But the doctor said to her in a low voice, "I'm Athena, Aunt Irene. Go ahead and sleep. When you wake up, you'll be all fine." Irene's eyes widened suddenly. When she looked past the doctor's surgical goggles, she recognized the woman's cat-like eyes. Back in the Hunt suite at the Hotel Finest, Cherry had shut herself up in Pete's bedroom and squashed herself miserably in a corner. She hugged the one and only plush toy she could find. She yelled, "Daddy, you're a bad man and you say mean things about Mummy. I'm not talking to you." Justin stood on the other side of the door, trying to understand what had come over his son. Pete's temper seemed to have gone wild. He'd been ignoring him since the day before and kept staring at him accusingly with big and teary eyes. It was making Justin feel as if he had done something horrible. Lawrence was in the room trying to coax the child out. He said, "Come on, Pete. Let's not sit here anymore. Why don't we go over to where the toys are?" Cherry raised her head and curled her lips as she said, "There are only cars and airplanes there. It's no fun. Why aren't there any Barbie dolls?" Justin's jaw tightened. He looked at the family doctor, who had come at his request, and asked in a low voice, "Is the test ready?" "Yes, it is," the doctor assured him quietly. Then he put on a big smile and walked into the bedroom cheerfully, saying, Hi, Pete. Why don't we do a little test? I'll give you a Barbie doll and we're done. Cherry did not know that Pete had never asked for Barbies, or that any of the adults might find it unusual for Pete to play with dolls. She just missed her toys. A Barbie sounded wonderful to her. She immediately nodded. Okay. A worried expression crossed Justin's face as he watched his son happily follow the doctor out of the bedroom. The test was over very quickly. Just half an hour later, Cherry bounced out of the study with the Barbie doll that the doctor had promised her. She ran straight past Justin into the bedroom. Justin stared after his son, with an indescribable expression on his face. He turned and entered the study. How did it go? The doctor coughed and replied, Why don't you take a seat, Mr. Hunt? We should talk. Justin clenched his fists tightly. The doctor explained that Pete was perfectly fine. However, from their conversation and the way Pete had answered the doctor's questions, it was clear that Pete seemed to think of himself not as a boy, but as a girl. Justin slammed his fists on the desk, startling the doctor. He didn't mean to look angry, but he was surprised and a bit scared. He was accustomed to solving the problems of the business world with ease. This situation called for a completely different approach, and he didn't know where to start. He thought, what is the right thing to do here? The doctor noticed Lawrence beckoning to him from out the doorway and followed him out. Lawrence waited another half hour, trying to give Justin some space to think. But finally, he had to say, It's time, Mr. Hunt. He had already asked around. Athena's operation would take 7 hours. If they left now, they would arrive just in time for the end of her surgery. Justin stood up solemnly. Let's go. He glanced into his son's bedroom on his way out. He could hear the child humming a little song while combing and braiding the doll's hair, then picking out a set of clothes and starting to put them on the doll. Justin was confused. He had never seen his son play with dolls. He didn't know what to do, which upset him. At last he said, Daddy's going out for a while, Pete. Let's play with the airplanes together when I get back. Cherry ignored him. After hesitating a moment, Justin said, I can bring you another doll when I come back this evening if you'd want. Cherry's eyes brightened, and she looked up at him eagerly. But then, remembering she was angry at her daddy, she forced herself to look away. She said, Cherry Pete doesn't want a Barbie doll. I want Mommy. She missed her mummy so much. She had already been pretending to be Pete for 2 days. She wanted to go home. Justin blinked. What did he say? Who's Cherry Pete? Justin felt overwhelmed, but he couldn't think clearly or do anything to better understand Pete just at that moment. He decided to focus on catching Athena. He and Lawrence headed to the hospital in town. They had decided that their best chance to catch Athena was to enter the operating room itself. While they were changing into protective gear in the sterile area, Lawrence said, Hey, about Pete. How about we ask Miss Smith to come over and talk to him? He talked to her about those tutors. Maybe he would talk to her about other things, too. Justin looked away. The thought of Nora irritated him even more. When they had come through the ward, he had noticed that the operation was still ongoing, but Nora was nowhere in sight. He couldn't believe her carelessness. He shook his head. No, that isn't necessary. Whatever his child was going through, he would do his best to understand and be supportive. Justin pushed the door open and entered the operating room. Inside, all the lights were focused on the operating table. His eyes locked directly onto the woman who was currently performing the operation. When he saw her, a stunned expression spread across his face. Justin had seen a photo of Athena before, and he thought he knew what to expect. But the woman performing the surgery seemed much thinner than the one in the photo. He stood quietly behind the crowd. No one else would have been allowed to enter the operating room in the middle of the surgery. If it weren't for the fact that the hospital belonged to his family, Justin wouldn't have been able to get in either. He stood back respectfully, not wanting to disturb the delicate procedure. He had intended to wait until Athena had finished the operation before he approached her. The operating room was very quiet. Only the surgeon's professional but hoarse voice sounded from time to time. What's her heart rate? Blood pressure? Number 10 blade? Hemostatic forceps? She had already been operating on the patient for around 6.5 hours. The assistant behind her was constantly wiping sweat from her brow, but her hands were still very stable, showing no signs of trembling at all. Her eyes were focused and serious as she stared intently at her work. Justin couldn't see her face clearly, but she nevertheless radiated an indescribable charm. At first, Justin thought that he had arrived too early. The idea of having to stand around in the operating room waiting for her annoyed him. But time flew as he watched her meticulously perform the procedure. Finally, she said, "Close the wound." The assistant, who had been behind her all this time, replied, "Stepping in." It was standard procedure for them to take over the final stitching, now that the most dangerous part of the operation were done. Everything had gone smoothly so far. But then someone accidentally bumped the tray that another assistant was holding, and the scalpel on it clattered onto the ground. The scene instantly became chaotic. The lights around the operating table were very bright, casting everything else in shadow. Athena was hidden among the assistants, moving about the darkness and confusion. She reprimanded, "Who did that? We can't have careless mistakes like that. It's fortunate that the final stitches are the only thing left. All observers and non-essential personnel out of here and clean up with me." The assistants and Athena were all wearing surgical gowns of the same color. A large group of them headed straight to the sterile area. Justin quickly followed them. After entering the sterile area, they each took off their goggles, masks, and gloves and began the strict hand-washing procedures. Except for one, the rest were all blonde. Justin knew from his research that Athena was not blonde. He walked up behind the only person with dark hair, clapped his hand on her shoulder, and said, "Hello, Athena. I've heard a lot about you." However, the woman that turned around was not Athena. She looked at Justin in surprise and said, "Dr. Athena has already left. I'm Lily, her assistant. Who are you?" Justin frowned. He realized that he had been fooled. He couldn't let Athena get away today. He took a step back, picked up his cell phone and called Lawrence. He ordered coldly, "Lock down all the exits on this level and keep all personnel inside." Back in the operating room, Nora could just see Justin leaving the ward from the corner of her eye. She let out a huge sigh of relief as she stood in front of the operating table. She had already known that the news that Athena was performing an operation would attract Justin's attention. She had made plans to get away from him before even entering the hospital. It was common knowledge that the surgeon heading the operation didn't do trivial things like sutures. But Nora was determined to do everything perfectly for her aunt. She had already decided to do every step of the procedure herself, even the sutures. As everyone else knew, Athena had already left with the assistants. No one would guess that she had merely turned around amidst the chaos earlier and stayed in the operating room. She moved quickly and had the stitches finished in just 10 minutes. Finally, after checking her aunt's vital signs, she announced, "Operation completed successfully." The duty of post-operative care was given to a professional nurse. Nora and the 2 remaining assistants then headed out to the sterile area. She yawned sleepily. A 7-hour operation was demanding on any surgeon, but to people who naturally had a weak constitution, like her, it was a particularly punishing ordeal. She would probably have to sleep for 14 to 15 hours straight when she got back to the hotel later. She was just thinking about how good it would feel to get some rest when she suddenly noticed Lily, who was just outside the sterile area, giving her a warning look. Nora paused. A foreboding feeling suddenly arose in her. The next moment, she saw a row of bodyguards in black standing at the operating room's entrance and checking everyone's ID cards one by one. Lily demanded angrily, "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Hunt? We were invited to perform this operation. Why are we being cross-examined?" Justin stood guard at the door, looking imposing and hostile. Next to him, Lawrence replied dispassionately, "My apologies, miss, but you're not doctors employed by this hospital. Should the patient experience any post-op adverse reactions, I'm afraid we'll have to get in touch. We need to collect your contact information." Nora sighed inwardly. It was going to be difficult to get rid of him. She thought for a moment about fighting her way out of the room, but her fingers and legs were so sore now that she had finished the operation, she knew she didn't have the strength to use force. Nora was too distracted reviewing her options to notice that Justin was staring at her. Even though she was wearing a surgical gown, her figure was very similar to Athena's. Everyone in the front of the group was cooperating with Lawrence's investigation. She was the only one standing at the back and looking a little like she had a guilty conscience. Justin strode over to her. His thin lips parted slightly, and he said, "That was a really good trick. You almost had me there." Everyone looked over. Nora instantly became the center of attention. Justin said solemnly, "Dr. Athena, why don't you take off your mask?" Justin was tall and knew how to use his height and demeanor to intimidate people. He bore down on Nora oppressively. Nora let out a low, resigned chuckle. Then she reached up and took off her mask and goggles. The goggles hooked onto her surgical cap, causing her dark hair to cascade down her back. Justin's eyes widened at the sight of her exquisite face. He couldn't believe it. Is Nora really Athena? This is impossible. Nora lowered her eyes and said in a low and lazy voice, "Well, you've caught me." Justin's heart skipped a beat. She continued, "I know I'm in the wrong for sneaking into the operating room to observe my aunt's surgery. If the hospital wants to hold me accountable, I understand." Then she looked up and added, "However, I am a family member of the patient. I'm sure the hospital can understand why I did it, right?" Her voice was calm and clear as a bell. Justin's first thought was that he was relieved, so she wasn't ignoring her aunt. Nora watched the man in front of her carefully. The look in his deep dark eyes was unfathomable. He exuded an unpredictable and mysterious air. She didn't know whether he believed her or not. While she was thinking, Justin suddenly said, "If you will agree to one condition, then on behalf of the hospital, I can promise not to hold you accountable." "What is it?" He let out a low, awkward cough and said, "Come back to the hotel with me and play with my son for 2 hours." Pete had been angry with him since the night before. He just kept asking for this woman he called Mummy. Justin had been upset by Nora's seemingly careless behavior in the days leading up to her aunt's surgery. Now that he knew she wasn't really a cold-hearted, unfeeling person, he was open to the idea of inviting her over. Especially if it cheered Pete up, it would be worth it. Nora was lost for words.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.